All right, so we're taking a deep dive into AI this time.
Sounds fun.
It's specifically how to make AI even smarter when it
Yeah.
comes to answering those tougher questions.
No, yeah.
You know, the ones that really make you think.
Yeah.
And you sent over this research paper on MR2AG,
Right.
which I have to admit, when I first saw that, I was like, whoa, what is that?
It sounds a little intimidating.
It does sound a bit intimidating at first, but let me tell you, after taking a look, this stuff is seriously cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. It's basically all about, helping AI bridge that gap between what it already knows and what it needs to go and look up that
Okay.
actually give you a really good answer.
So it's kind of like how we as humans use sources and evidence to
Exactly.
back up what we're saying.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
So the paper kind of starts by talking about a really common problem with current AI models,
Oh.
especially those really fancy ones like multimodal large language models.
MLMs we're talking about?
MLLMs, yeah, they're great at visual tasks, like recognizing what's in an image.
Mm-hmm.
And they can even do some pretty good common sense reasoning.
Oh,
But when you hit them with a question that needs some really, really specific knowledge,
yeah.
like factual knowledge, that's where things can get a bit shaky.
So it's like they have the general knowledge, but not necessarily the hyper-specific details.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you ask them,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what year did this specific building open?
Right.
They might have a ton of knowledge about architecture or history,
Right.
but they probably wouldn't know that exact date off the top of their head.
Unless they were like a total history buff about that one building.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I've lost count of how many times I've gone down an internet rabbit hole trying to find a specific fact
Oh, yeah,
and just ended up with a bunch of vague or even contradictory information.
totally.
It's so frustrating.
It is, and that's the kind of frustration that these researchers are trying to fix. With MR2AG, they basically want to make AI less like a frustrating search engine and more like an expert
I like that.
who can give you reliable answers.
That's a good goal.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do they go about doing that? What exactly is MR2AG and how does it work?
Well, MR2AG stands for Multimodal Retrieval Reflection Augmented Generation,
Okay.
which is a mouthful,
It is a mouthful.
but it's actually a pretty clever three-step process.
3 steps. All right, break it down for me.
So step one is called retrieval reflection. And basically what happens is the AI first has to figure out, do I even need to look this up?
Oh, interesting.
Can I answer this based on what I already know, or do I need some outside information?
So the AI is actually making a decision about whether or not it needs to do research.
Exactly.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So what happens if it does need to look something up?
Well, that's where step two comes in relevance reflection. And it's not just about finding any information.
Right.
It's about finding the right piece of information, like the exact right piece of information.
I'm sensing an analogy coming on.
You know me too well. It's like if the AI is trying to find evidence for a claim it's making,
Okay.
so it might find a Wikipedia article that's relevant,
Right.
but then it goes deeper and it pinpoints like the exact paragraph or even the sentence that has the answer in it.
So the AI is like developing research skills.
Exactly.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. So what about that third and final step?
Okay, so step three is all about quality control.
Okay.
It's called answer post-processing. And basically what happens is the AI might find a bunch of different possible answers during its search,
Uh-huh.
but then it has to rank those answers based on how confident it is in each one.
Oh, so it's not just about finding an answer. It's about finding the best answer.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, so you get the most likely answer first, and you don't have to sift through a bunch of maybes.
Right. Makes sense. So we've got the 3 steps, figuring out if you need to look something up, finding the most relevant information if you do,
Yeah.
and then ranking the potential answers based on confidence.
Uh-huh.
That's a pretty solid system. But the real question is, does it actually work? What kind of results are they seeing with this approach?
So the exciting thing is it's showing some really, really promising results.
Okay.
They tested it out on these data sets that are specifically designed to test this kind of knowledge-based question answering,
Okay.
like InfoSeek and Encyclopedic VQA.
Mhm.
And in those tests, it's significantly outperforming other methods.
So it's not just a theory. It's actually delivering the goods.
It's doing the thing.
That's really impressive. I'm starting to see how this could play out in the real world. The paper used some real-world examples to show the potential, right?
Yeah, they did. One example they used was figuring out the opening date of a building
Okay.
just from a picture of it.
Wow.
And another one was identifying the habitat of an animal.
Okay.
Huh?
I can already see where this is going.
Hmm?
Imagine taking a picture of a landmark and instantly being able to learn its whole history,
Right.
or getting accurate medical information based on a scan.
Yeah, it's amazing.
This could change everything.
It could change everything about how we interact with information.
Wow. Okay, I'm on board.
Okay.
But I have to ask, are there any limitations to this approach? No technology is perfect, right?
Of course. Yeah, every new technology has its challenges. And these researchers are actually really upfront about that.
Okay,
One of the main limitations they point out is that the system really relies on the accuracy of that first step,
right.
finding the right source material.
If you don't have the right information to begin with, you can't get a good answer.
Exactly. Garbage in, garbage out.
Makes sense. So the quest for more accurate retrieval methods continues.
It does.
And then there's that example in the paper with the bridge length where the AI got a bit tripped up
Yeah.
by that one specific phrase.
Yeah.
Does that tie into this whole retrieval challenge, or is there something else going on there?
So that example actually highlights another big challenge,
Okay.
which is getting AI to really understand context. Even if it finds the right source material, it can still get confused by nuances of language.
Sure.
So in that case, it misinterpreted the phrase suspended span
Uh-huh.
and ended up giving the wrong answer.
So it's like it needs to learn not just what words mean,
Right.
but how their meaning can change depending on the words around them. So
Exactly.
much deeper level of comprehension.
It is, and it's something that humans do really easily.
Right.
But for AI, it's still a hurdle.
It's still learning.
Still learning, yeah.
That's why they call it artificial intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah, it really is still learning. And that's what makes all this research so exciting. We're seeing AI get smarter, like right in front of us.
It's evolving.
It is.
So before we get too far ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
let's take a closer look at how this MR2AG thing is actually put into practice.
Hmm.
The researchers talked about how they actually trained an AI model using this framework.
Right.
And that's a whole other layer of complexity.
Yeah.
So what does the training look like?
So they use this clever combination of like existing resources and some new data sets they actually created themselves.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so for the General Knowledge Foundation, they use these visual instruction data sets,
Yeah.
like LAIT.
LAT.
Yeah, so these data sets are basically huge collections of images and text that are meant to teach AI how to understand the relationship between what it sees and what it reads.
So it's like AI boot camp.
Yeah, like getting it up to speed,
Getting them the basics
done
down.
all the basics, yeah. And then for specialized training in knowledge-based question answering,
Yep.
they created this brand new data set just for this research
That
called MR2AG-RT.
So LAT is boot camp.
Yeah,
And then MR2AGIT is the specialized training program.
exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But aren't there already tons of data sets out there for AI training? What makes this MR2AG data set so special?
That's a good question. They were actually really strategic about the data sets they picked. They focused on data sets that were already being used in like cutting edge visual question answering research, like InfoSeek and Encyclopedic VQA.
Hmm.
It's like they wanted to make sure that the AI was training on the same stuff it would be tested on later.
Right, so it could really excel in those real world situations.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's like training for the specific game you're going to be playing.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how exactly do you teach AI something as complex as like figuring out if information is relevant and then pinpointing that exact piece of evidence within a sea of data? That seems like such a human skill.
Yeah, it's really interesting how they do it. This is where that whole reflection part of MR2AG comes into play.
Okay.
They introduced these things called reflection tokens into the AI's vocabulary.
Reflection tokens.
Yeah, it's kind of like giving the AI special keywords
Okay.
that trigger certain actions or thought processes.
So when the AI sees these tokens, it knows it's time to make a decision or take a specific action.
Exactly, like in that first step, retrieval reflection,
Right.
there are tokens like retrieval and no retrieval.
So when the AI encounters those tokens, it's like, okay, do I need to go look something up or not?
Exactly, it's like a little prompt.
Cool.
Yeah, and then in the relevance reflection step,
Right.
there are tokens for relevant and irrelevant.
So it's helping the AI kind of like highlight the most important bits.
Exactly, yeah.
And ignore the rest.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And this approach, using these reflection tokens, is actually pretty unique in AI research.
Okay.
A lot of the other methods out there rely on these really complex rules or extra models to filter information,
Okay.
but MR2AG is different.
So it's not adding on a bunch of extra stuff.
Not really. It's more about working with what the AI already knows how to do.
It's like trusting the AI's natural abilities.
Exactly. And guiding it to think more like we do.
I like it.
And the cool thing is that it really works.
So it's not just a good idea in theory. It actually works in practice.
It actually works. Yeah, their experiments, MR2AG did a better job than the other methods, even the ones that were using these really complicated filtering systems.
Wow.
So it's a really good example of how sometimes simpler is better.
Right. Keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the potential here, but like with any technology, I'm
Mhm.
always curious about the downsides.
Yeah, for sure.
What are some of the limitations or things that didn't quite go as planned?
Well, one of the big things they talk about is that MR2AG is still really dependent on the accuracy of that first step,
Okay, that retrieval step.
right? Finding the right source material. If the AI gets bad information at the beginning,
Right.
then the whole thing falls apart.
Garbage in, garbage out. So the
Exactly.
search for better retrieval methods continues.
It definitely does.
And what about that example with the bridge length where the AI got tripped up by that one phrase? Does that tie into this retrieval issue or is there something else going on there?
That's a good point. That example actually shows another big challenge in AI,
Okay.
which is getting AI to really understand context,
Okay.
even if it finds the right source.
Mm-hmm.
It can still get confused by the nuances of language.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, it misinterpreted the phrase suspended span
Yeah.
and gave the wrong answer.
So it understood what the words meant individually, but not necessarily what they meant together in that specific context.
Exactly.
So it's like needing to teach AI how to read between the lines,
Yeah.
which is something that we do automatically as humans.
We do it without even thinking about it. But for AI, it's still a big challenge.
Yeah, it's like teaching AI to understand subtext.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how this MR2AG framework works, the data sets it was trained on,
Right.
some of the limitations.
Yeah.
Now, I remember you mentioned earlier that they tested MR2AG on a few different models.
At different scales, too.
Did it hold up across the board? Were there any surprises?
Actually, one of the coolest things about this research is how adaptable MR2AG is.
Okay.
They didn't just test it on one AI model.
Uh-huh.
They tried it out on 3 different ones.
Oh, wow.
Mifamini Gemini and LLVA.
And those all have different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, they're all a little different. And the
Uh-huh.
results were really consistent.
Oh, wow.
Across all 3 models and at different scales, MR2AG made the models better at knowledge-based visual question answering.
So it wasn't just a fluke that only worked in very specific circumstances.
Nope, it seemed to work pretty much everywhere they tried it.
That's really impressive.
Yeah.
It sounds like this framework could be a core part of AI development moving forward,
Yeah, I think so too.
not just like a one-off solution for a very specific problem.
Right.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. The 3 steps of MR2AG,
Yeah.
the data sets they use for training,
Mm-hmm.
the limitations,
Right.
the potential for future development.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've learned a ton.
Good.
So before we move on, what was your biggest takeaway from this research? What really stood out to you?
That's a good question. I think for me, it was how elegant the solution was.
Elegant.
Yeah. They've taken this really complicated problem, how to make AI better at reasoning and answering questions.
Yeah.
And they solved it with this framework that's actually really simple and easy to understand.
You're right. It's not about brute forcing intelligence.
Yeah,
It's about helping AI think more like a human would.
exactly. And I think that's what makes this research so interesting.
Right. It's a totally new way of thinking about AI
It is.
and knowledge.
Yeah,
That could lead to some really big breakthroughs.
definitely.
Okay, so I'm ready for the AI revolution.
Me too.
But speaking of revolutions,
Yeah.
there's another interesting aspect of this research that I want to talk about, which is the whole concept of prompt engineering.
Yes,
It seems like it plays a big role in making MR2AG work.
it does. It's really important. Yeah, it's really all about giving the AI the right instructions, to help it really learn and understand.
So it's like we're not just dumping a bunch of data into the AI and saying, figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
We're carefully designing those instructions
Mhm.
to guide the whole learning process.
Exactly. Like, remember those reflection tokens we talked about?
Retrieval relevant.
Yeah, those are actually introduced through these really specific prompts.
Oh, cool.
So the researchers actually had to train the AI to understand what those tokens mean and what it should do when it sees them.
So it's almost like they're teaching the AI a new language for how to interact with information.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
That's really cool. And they didn't just stop there, did they? They went even further with these prompts.
Oh, yeah, they actually designed like custom prompts for different tasks and data sets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so for example, when they were working with InfoSeek,
Mm-hmm.
they used a prompt that encouraged the AI to give really short answers,
Okay.
like one word or a phrase,
Interesting.
because that's how InfoSeek evaluates its answers.
Right. It's all about being concise.
Exactly,
Yeah.
short and sweet. And
Yeah.
then when they were working with encyclopedic VQA,
Which has those questions with multiple possible answers.
exactly, they use a different prompt that encouraged the AI to list out all of its answers, separated by a specific symbol.
So it's like formatting the answers in a specific way.
Yeah, so it's easier for the researchers to evaluate.
Got it. So it's all about kind of fine-tuning the AI's communication style based on the specific task at hand.
Yeah, you could say that.
It's like they're coaching the AI to be the best it can be.
That's a good way to think about it. And I
Okay.
think that's one of the things that makes this research so strong. They really paid attention to all the details.
Yeah, it's not just about having those big ideas. It's about making them work in practice.
Exactly. It's about execution.
It's about the details.
Yeah, and that can make a big difference.
Right. It's like the difference between having a great idea for a novel and actually writing the whole thing.
Yeah, it's like all the little things, the word choices, the plot, twists, the
Now,
characters.
all the things that come together to make a really good story.
Exactly. And this paper is kind of like that.
It's a good story. It makes you want to know more.
Yeah, it definitely leaves you wanting to see what happens next.
So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in the MR2AG story?
One big area for future work is improving that initial retrieval process.
Right, we talked about that earlier. If the AI doesn't find the right information to start with, can't give a good answer.
Exactly. So, what if we could create an AI that could not only find the most relevant sources, but also understand how those sources are connected to each other?
So it's not just finding information, it's understanding how it all fits together.
Right. It's like building a map of knowledge.
Wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it could lead to some really interesting breakthroughs.
Right, the AI could start to see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that could lead to even more accurate and insightful answers.
I like it. So better retrieval, more context, more connections.
Mhm.
What else?
Another area to think about is making MR2AG more resistant to attacks.
Attacks, like someone trying to trick the AI or make it do something bad.
Exactly. As AI becomes more powerful, we need to make sure that it can't be easily manipulated.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Imagine someone changing an image slightly to make the AI misinterpret it or give false information.
Right. That could have serious consequences.
Yeah, that's a bit scary. But I'm sure people are working on ways to protect AI from those kinds of attacks.
Oh, yeah. It's a constant back and forth between attackers and defenders.
It's like an arms race.
Kind of, yeah. But it's something we need to take seriously if we want to build AI that we can trust.
That's a good point. It's a reminder that every new technology has the potential for both good and bad.
For sure.
It all comes down to how we develop it and how we choose to use it.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's so important to have these conversations.
Right, to really think critically about AI and where it's going.
Yeah. And to be involved in shaping its future.
Well said.
Yeah.
So, to our listener out there who's now learned all about MR2AG, I have a question for you.
Okay.
How do you think this technology could be used to make a positive impact? What problems could it help us solve? What possibilities could it unlock? There's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for AI.
It really is. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of MR2AG. We hope you've enjoyed the journey and that you've learned something new along the way.
Thanks for listening.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.